John had mucked around with feedback for a while, and yes, it was intentional. He found it quite difficult to get the right amount of feedback, you know. And I think it was the first time, was it not, that feedback was used on a record? He loved things like that. He loved weird kind of effects, and it was his idea. It was great.
I seem to remember that John and George had Everly Brothers Gibsons.
Yeah, we had these big Gibson round
we
sound
called
hole
them Everly
electric
Brothers.
ones.
They looked like the Everlys had used, and
they were.
John put, and so they were electric. They were acoustic, semi-electrics. They had electric facilities, I think. And John leaned his against the
amplifier, yeah.
And then we were just going to go on and talk about the song, and suddenly the A string started feeding back at us. We were just, what? Can you do that? You know, so George, well, yes, I edited on the front or something. So
but he figured out how to do it, you know, because we used to do it on stage then, live. So John figured out, you know, you just had to hit the A, and I get it buzzing by the amp.
So that was the start of all that
way,
Hendrix feedback.
He invented Jimi Hendrix.
It probably was, actually, you know. Well, you know, once you see somebody messing with feedback, it's a whole field of research, isn't it, as it became later. Yeah. But I'm sure that's how it happened. It wasn't engineered, it came from the accident, and then we made it something we could edit onto the front.
Confidence is often the key to success, and John had plenty of it. When he introduced I Want to Hold Your Hand to George Martin, he confidently declared, "You'd better come down here and listen to our next #1 record." That confidence paid off big time. The song shot to #1 in Britain and launched the Beatles into the American spotlight, setting them up for global fame. But confidence doesn't always tell the whole story. Take 1964, for example, when the Beatles were scrambling for an end-of-year single. John wasn't exactly optimistic. "I've written this song, but it's lousy," he told Ringo one morning. Still, they gave it a shot, riff and all. That song John was describing was I Feel Fine, which wound up ending 1964 with a great big bang. The story behind I Feel Fine has its fair share of twists. John later claimed in one interview that he wrote it at a recording session, while Paul said that they co-wrote it based on John's idea. One thing is clear, the song was built around a guitar riff inspired by Bobby Parker's Watch Your Step, a favorite of John's. George explained in an interview, "But all riffs in that tempo have a similar sound. John played it, and I did play it as well, and it became the double-tracked sound." John elaborated, "Watch Your Step is one of my favorite records. The Beatles have used the lick in various forms. The Allman Brothers used the lick straight as it was, as evidenced in their song One Way Out. The Beatles were quite familiar with Watch Your Step, as they included it in their live performances during '61 and '62. At the time, John was obsessed with guitar riffs. I tried to get that effect into practically every song on the LP, John said, but the others wouldn't have it. I told them I'd write a song especially for the riff, so they said, yes, you go away and do that, knowing that we'd almost finished the album. As for the time of its writing, John's comment about the song being written at a recording session may very well have been true, but not at the same recording session that the song was recorded. During October 6th, the 1964 session, when the Beatles recorded 8 days a week, John was already going over the distinctive guitar riff of I Feel Fine, which can be heard in between takes. Therefore, John must have gotten together with Paul to finish off the song sometime between October 6th and October 18th, 1964, when it was actually recorded. One thing that is for certain is that it was primarily John's song with a little help from Paul, most likely on the bridge. Jeff Emmerich, who was serving as second engineer on the day this was recorded, relates. As the band began rehearsing their next song in the studio with George Martin, I used the opportunity to sit in the control room and relax for a few minutes. I was making small talk with Norman Smith, first engineer at this session, about something or other, when all of a sudden I hear this loud, buzzing sound issue forth from the speakers. "What the bloody hell was that?" I asked him, alarmed. My first thought was that a cable had gone bad or that a piece of equipment had failed. Norman chuckled. "Have a look," he said to me. I pressed my nose up against the control room glass and was astonished to see John kneeling before his amplifier, guitar in hand. We knew that if you brought a guitar too close to an amplifier, it would squeal. But John was using it in a controlled way for the first time. The squeal mentioned is, of course, the sound heard at the beginning of I Feel Fine, the explanation of which has become legendary and has been related from many sources in many ways. Emmerich gives us an interesting detail that clarifies the origin of the introductory sound on the record. Norman later related to me that they had discovered that sound purely by accident at a previous session, the night they recorded 8 days a week. It was just serendipity. During the break, John had leaned his guitar against his amp but had neglected to turn down the volume of the pickup. Just at that moment, for no particular reason, Paul had plucked a low A on his bass, and, from across the room, the sound wave set John's guitar feeding back. They loved the resultant howling, so much so that John apparently had been fooling around with the effect ever since. And with his new song, entitled I Feel Fine, he was determined to immortalize the sound on record, years before Jimi Hendrix ever started doing it. Paul's eyewitness account sheds a little more light on this subject. We were just about to walk away to listen to a take when John leaned his guitar against the amp. I can still see him doing it. He really should have turned the electric off. It was only on a tiny bit, and John just leaned it against the amp when it went, "Nyah," and we went, "What's that? Voodoo?" No, it's feedback. Wow, it's a great sound. George Martin was there, so we said, "Can we have that on the record?" "Well, I suppose we could edit it in on the front." It was a found object, an accident caused by leaning the guitar against the amp. John was very proud of this accomplishment. The record had the first feedback anywhere, he claimed in 1980.
I defy anybody to find the record unless it's some old blues record in 1922, the first pop record, where I had this electric acoustic guitar and it would feed back. And the little intro was goes, is the first feedback. I claim it for the Beatles.
Interestingly, when Paul, George, and Ringo are seen on the anthology film discussing the feedback at the beginning of I Feel Fine, George jokingly claims that we invented Jimi Hendrix. After the feedback was recorded, John was seen having a little trouble singing the song for more than one reason. First of all, it was in a key that was too high for him to comfortably sing. And second of all, he found it difficult to sing and play that distinctive riff at the same time. Emmerich says, John was also more prone to breaking strings than George. He attacked his guitar harder, with less finesse, and I remember that happening several times during the recording of I Feel Fine, which is quite an aggressive, up-tempo song. When that would happen, he would call out, "Mal? Mal?" Mal Evans was usually the one who would change the guitar strings, although on this day he wasn't there, so the task fell to Neil Aspinall instead. Neil was physically a lot smaller than his fellow roadie, so everyone had a good laugh when he walked over to take care of the problem, and John slowly looked him up and down, finally exclaiming with perfect comic timing, "God, you've shrunken the wash, Mal." As for musicianship, John is in top form. Fronting the band with his rambling, excellently played guitar riff, he also sings lead with a commanding and convincing tone, comfortable in the song's chosen key. George puts in a great performance as well, mimicking John's acoustic riff on the electric guitar to add a richness that makes it distinct from most other Beatles songs to date. Actually, no rhythm instrument is heard at all in the verses of the song, both guitars playing the guitar riff to allow for airiness in the arrangement. The guitar solo is overdubbed on top of both John and George's guitar riffs, which touch on the same notes during the fifth and sixth measures to create a surreal effect. Oh yeah, George's harmonies are good too. As for Ringo's drumming, Paul explains. The drumming is basically what we used to think of as what I'd say drumming. There was a style of drumming on What I'd Say, which is sort of Latin R&B, that Ray Charles' drummer, Milt Turner, played on the original record, and we used to love it. One of the big clinching factors about Ringo as the drummer in the band was that he could really play that so well. I Feel Fine spent 5 weeks at #1 in Britain, And after their previous 3 American singles failed to crack the top 10, this song catapulted them back to number 1 on the American charts for 3 weeks. Even the single's B-side, She's a Woman, peaked at number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100, their highest B-side charting yet. Nearly every future Beatles single released after this in the US during their career also made it to the top spot. So in this case, John's uncertainty about I Feel Fine led to pulling them out of a slight lull in their success, and cementing them in the number 1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100 for the next 6 years. I guess the song wasn't quite as lousy as John originally thought.
I like singles myself, you know. I don't collect albums, I collect singles. I hate having to buy an album just to get one tune. And there's nobody's albums, including my own, since I was 16, that I can stand listening to a whole album of one person. It's a bore, you know, but that's the game. And it's enjoyable to make them. But it'd be great. I wish they had EPs here like they used to in England, you know, where you just put 4 out. You know, there's very little music that can keep you interested or keep me interested. You know, I like singles myself, even on an album. I like it to... I like commercials, you know, I like TV commercials, radio jingles.
I am stuck on Band-Aid brand 'cause Band-Aid stuck on me. I am stuck on Band-Aid 'cause Band-Aid stuck on me. 'Cause they really stick to your fingers and they stick on bended knees.
Remember, only Johnson & Johnson makes Band-Aid brand adhesive bandages with the unique Super Stick adhesive. Depend on the protection of America's #1 bandage.
I am stuck on Band-Aid 'cause Band-Aid stuck on me.
Because I like the idea of saying it in 60 seconds. I like headlines in the newspaper, you know. I do occasionally miss the long articles you get in English newspapers, but I really like if it says it in one headline. That to me is the best way of saying it. It's simple, straight, and it's over. The message is over. And if they had 60-second records, I'd be in there making them. I like them short.